had never believed in curses. Not truly. But when I received a letter marked with wax and bearing the old crest of Ravenhurst, a place my grandmother once warned me never to speak of, I hesitated. The letter was from a solicitor, informing me that I had inherited the sprawling estate deep in the countryside of Yorkshire. I remembered Ravenhurst only vaguely. My parents never spoke of it, and I hadn't been there since I was 6. Yet something about the pull of the unknown, and the promise of finally uncovering the long-buried secrets of my family, compelled me to go. The drive was long, winding through dense woods and across a crumbling stone bridge. Fog clung to the trees like gauze, and the shadows stretched unnaturally as the sun dipped below the horizon. When I arrived at the gate, rusted iron and flaking paint greeted me like teeth in a corpse's smile. Beyond it, the manor loomed like a forgotten god. Its spires cut into the sky, and its windows glared like dark eyes. Inside, it was musty, the air thick with the scent of mildew and dust. The caretaker, an old man named Elias, barely spoke as he handed me the keys and warned, "Lock the 13th room each night, and never speak its name aloud." The first night passed uneventfully. I roamed the halls with a flashlight, my footsteps echoing off cold stone. Portraits of grim ancestors lined the walls, their eyes following me as I moved. The air in the house seemed to breathe, subtly expanding and contracting as though the manor itself were alive. I found a library filled with leather-bound tomes in languages I couldn't understand. In one corner, a grandfather clock ticked off time in uneven beats, like a heart struggling to keep pace. I discovered the 13th room near the west wing. Unlike the others, its door was thick, blackened wood with strange carvings that pulsed faintly in the flashlight's beam. I locked it as instructed and turned away. But as I lay in bed later, I heard it, a whisper, faint and wet, like lips brushing skin. At first I thought it was the wind through the chimney, but it grew louder. Then came the knock, soft, deliberate, and from the 13th room. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the hallway with my back to the door, holding a rusted fire poker like it would protect me from whatever dream clawed its way through the walls. The next morning, Elias was gone. No note, no sign of struggle, just vanished. His quarters were empty, his belongings untouched, and the truck he arrived in sat quietly in the gravel driveway. I searched the manor for signs of life but found none. That's when I discovered the journal. It was tucked into a false compartment in the study's desk, its cover worn and pages yellowed. It belonged to Archibald Ravenhurst, my great-great-grandfather. The entries grew more frantic the further I read. He spoke of a room built not by men, but by something older, something summoned. It feeds on memory, one entry read. Each night it grows stronger. I have sealed it, but it calls to me. Another passage mentioned the ritual of silence, a series of chants to be performed daily to keep the room contained. Without them, the house would turn upon itself, devouring its past and warping time. I shivered, recalling the whispering last night. The door had been locked, but maybe that wasn't enough. That night I heard the knock again. Only this time it was followed by footsteps. Soft, dragging footsteps that stopped just outside my room. The clocks in Ravenhurst no longer told the truth. I would wake at dawn only to find the sun still buried beneath the horizon. Meals spoiled faster than they should. My watch, which I'd set to the second before arriving, now ran backward. I tried to leave. I packed my bags and marched out the front door. But each path out of the property twisted back in on itself. The gate, no matter how far I walked, always reappeared ahead. I screamed until my throat was raw. The trees were listening. Their branches arched over me, muttering in a wind I couldn't feel. That evening, I walked the halls and noticed something strange. Paintings were changing. A girl who'd once held a bouquet now held a bone. A man in a top hat now wore a noose. The 13th room's door was cracked open when I passed, though I hadn't touched it since the first night. I slammed it shut, heart pounding. Then I saw something in the reflection of the hall mirror. A face, pale and eyeless, peering out from the sliver of black behind the 13th door. It started with the laughter. Childlike giggles, high-pitched and echoing through the walls like mocking chimes. I followed the sound one afternoon and found myself in the nursery. Abandoned, dusty, filled with broken toys and a rocking horse that creaked on its own. There were handprints on the windows, too small to be adult, too fresh to be old. I tried painting over them, but the prints returned. That night, I dreamed of a little girl in a white dress. She stood at the foot of my bed, her mouth sewn shut with black thread. She raised a finger to her lips, then pointed toward the west wing, toward the 13th room. I awoke soaked in sweat, my sheets torn and floor covered in tiny footprints. I confronted the room again. The carvings were bleeding. Thick, black liquid oozed from the etchings, pooling at the base like ink from a poisoned pen. Something inside was stirring. I could feel it breathing now, its rhythm syncing with my heartbeat. I tried praying. It laughed by the 7th day. I no longer trusted what I saw. Hallways led to nowhere. Doors opened into identical copies of the room I just left. I'd hear footsteps behind me, turn, and find a corridor I didn't remember building. My reflection would lag behind my movements in mirrors, then smile when I didn't. I found myself in conversations I didn't remember starting. I'd lose hours at a time, coming to in strange parts of the manor with dust in my mouth and blood under my fingernails. In one such moment, I found a body in the cellar, Elias. His face had been torn off, leaving a blank, polished surface where his features once were. Carved into his chest, in precise letters, were the words, "The room is hungry." I buried him in the courtyard under a statue of an angel with its face turned toward the house. That night, I tried to destroy the 13th door. I swung an axe, set fire to it. The flames died without smoke, the wood unmoved. It opened on its own at midnight. I didn't look inside. Desperate, I returned to the journal. In the final pages, Archibald described the ritual in painful detail. It required sacrifice, blood willingly given, silence strictly kept. I needed candles made from human fat, a circle drawn in bone dust, and the name of the room written backward in the air. I didn't know what that meant until the house showed me. A door appeared in the east wing where there had been only wall. Inside was a hidden chamber filled with shelves of human remains, vials of preserved organs, and tools that belonged in a butcher's den. I wept as I gathered what I needed. The ritual took 3 hours. As I chanted, shadows clawed at the circle, screaming in voices not my own. My blood ran from my palm into the floorboards, and the 13th room screamed with a sound that shattered windows and cracked mirrors. But it wasn't enough. The door didn't close, it opened wider. I had only fed it. The house began to rot. Paint peeled in seconds. Mold grew like veins. Furniture collapsed into ash. I saw people now, ghostly residents reliving deaths they never escaped. A woman fell from the banister night after night. A man tore his own eyes out in the study. I saw myself among them, whispering things I hadn't said yet. The manor was inside me now. I heard the 13th room in my dreams. Its voice seductive, promising answers if I'd only step inside. I resisted. I sealed the door with chains, nails, even prayers scrawled in my own blood. But each morning the door was open, wider than before. On the 9th night I saw my grandmother. She was young, beautiful, weeping in the hallway. She told me the truth. The room was born the day I was. My bloodline carried its curse, and I had been drawn here to complete the cycle. Only one could contain it. Only one could become the 13th. I made my choice. I took the axe to the library floor, exposing the rotten earth beneath. I drew a final circle in blood and bone. I spoke its name backward, "More, try it," and offered myself. The house howled. Walls bent inward. Light fled. My body twisted. My bones cracked and reknit. I became part of the house, part of its heartbeat, its hunger. The door is now sealed, but I watch from the other side, waiting. Occasionally, someone finds the manor. They walk its halls, hear the laughter, feel the cold. I call to them softly. I wait for them to ask, "What is behind the 13th door?" And when they do, I open it. The manor was sold again, decades later, to a young woman escaping the chaos of city life. She thought it a bargain. Untouched land, ancient architecture, a peaceful place to write. The locals warned her, of course, but she smiled and ignored them. On her first night, she noticed the cold, the unnatural silence, the way the shadows in the west wing moved when she wasn't looking. And then, she found the 13th room. The key was already in the lock, the door slightly ajar. As she approached, she heard a voice from the other side. Familiar. Gentle. Hers. It whispered, "Welcome home." The young woman's name was Clara Alden. She'd come from London to escape the noise, the pressure, the endless grind of city life. Ravenhurst Manor was meant to be a retreat, an odd but charming fixer-upper tucked away in the forgotten hills. She'd bought it cheap at auction. No history provided, no questions asked. The real estate agent had been unusually eager to finalize the sale. The villagers nearby, few as they were, had gone quiet when she mentioned the name. One even crossed herself and hurried away without another word. Still, Clara had dreams. She imagined writing poetry in the drawing room, sipping coffee as fog rolled in through stained glass windows. But the moment she crossed the threshold, that dream curdled. The air was too still, like the house had been holding its breath for decades and exhaled only for her. The door to the 13th room stood slightly ajar, though she hadn't touched a single key. And as she stepped forward, her own voice whispered from the dark, "Welcome." Clara jumped back, slamming the door shut and locking it on instinct. She laughed nervously, blaming the wind or the echo. But the sound hadn't come from behind the door. It had come from her own throat, warped, echoed, and thrown back at her. The house didn't just reflect sound. It mirrored intent. That night, she dreamed she was floating above the manor, watching it pulse like a heart beneath the earth. Lights flickered inside as if something were pacing the halls. She awoke to music, soft piano from nowhere. The air smelled of lavender and rot. A child's laugh trickled down from the nursery. Yet, when she searched, she found only cobwebs and silence. She nearly left. Bags packed, car started. But the driveway was gone. The manor had rearranged itself. Roads that led away curled back inward, swallowing themselves like a snake devouring its own tail. Clara was trapped, but it hadn't yet claimed her. Not fully. Not until she began to hear her name spoken in her own voice, whispered from every corner of the house. On the third day, Clara discovered the library. Dust choked the air, and the fireplace was black with something thick and tar-like. Books lined the shelves. Hundreds, thousands. Most of them unreadable, filled with nonsense symbols or entire pages of repeating words. One book, however, opened easily. It was a diary, and the name on the first page sent a chill down her spine. Archibald Ravenhurst. She read through the entries, her stomach tightening with each page. Mentions of the room, of the blood rituals, of voices whispering in the dark. But one line stood out, scrawled over and over across a single yellowed sheet. It does not forget. It does not forgive. It does not die. It waits. That night, Clara saw the portrait. A painting that hadn't been there before, of a man with hollow eyes and a smile stitched into his face. It was signed in blood, "To my heir." She threw the painting into the fire. It didn't burn. Instead, it screamed. The 13th room was open the next morning. Wide open. No locks remained. No key. Just yawning black, as if the room were a hole in reality itself. She stood at the threshold, unable to see more than a few feet inside. Something shifted just beyond view. Too tall, too thin, eyes like gleaming coins. She stepped back, and the door slammed shut on its own. In the library, the diary had new pages now, written in her own handwriting. Instructions, schematics, rituals. She didn't remember writing any of them, but her hand trembled with familiarity as she traced the ink. The cycle renews. One note read, "Seal it, or become it." Clara scavenged the manor, gathering bones, melted wax, and fragments of human hair from places she wished she'd never found. The ritual required silence, pain, memory, and the blood had to be her own. She cut deep, deeper than she meant to, but the house was satisfied for the moment. The 13th door vanished, but so did every mirror in the house. And the paintings? Now they all stared directly at her. Every single one. The house turned inward. The hallway she walked down stretched impossibly long. Rooms stacked within rooms. She opened a closet and found herself looking out into the attic. Time unraveled. She spoke to someone she thought was a dream, only to find her words written on the walls later, in chalk she didn't remember holding. Her past began to bleed into the present. She heard her mother's lullaby from beneath the floorboards. She saw her childhood dog rotting in the garden, tail still wagging. The house mocked her memories, corrupting them, reshaping them into grotesque versions. Worse still were the doppelgangers. She saw herself in the halls. Dozens of her. One crying, one screaming, one staring with eyes full of black ink. The Clara in the mirror began moving out of sync, smiling when she wasn't, speaking without sound. And each night, the 13th door returned. Closer, always closer, until it was just outside her room. On the 7th night, Clara found a mirror hidden beneath the nursery floor. It was ancient, cracked, and covered in runes. When she gazed into it, she saw not herself, but a man, pale, eyeless, smiling. He spoke with her voice. "You've come far, Clara, but the house still waits." It offered her a choice. The house needed a heart, a mind to anchor it. She could leave if she gave it someone else. A bloodline, a sacrifice, a new heir. Or she could stay and become part of the 13th room. The hunger had to be fed. She thought of the villagers, the ones who had known and said nothing. She thought of the real estate agent, of everyone who had looked the other way. Clara had always been strong, always had a plan. But now she wasn't sure she was still human. She was unraveling, and part of her wanted to stay. Because behind all the terror was knowledge, a kind of eternal, ancient knowing. The room did not just consume, taught. Clara made her choice. She sealed the house once again, performed the ritual, spilled her blood, chanted the name backward as it carved itself into her skin. More try it. The door closed. The manor sighed. She awoke days later in London, on her couch, her manuscript in her lap. It was complete. Every page detailed her stay in Ravenhurst. Perfect horror novel. No one believed it was real. Her editor praised it as visceral and brilliant. But Clara knew better. She had given the house a gift, her story, and in doing so she had fed it once again. Now the 13th room waits, buried deep inside the pages, waiting for the next reader, the next heir. And when they ask, "Where is Ravenhurst Manor?" it will whisper back, "You've already opened the door."